Hey there, folks. This is Chris McLean, Peak Performance and Transformation Coach. Welcome to another episode of the Peak Performance and Predictable Growth Show, the Peak Performance show for creative agency founders, owners, and leaders, where we explore the agency journey from the unique perspective of those at the coalface of the industry. My guests help us unlock and dissect strategies, tools, and tactics from the trenches that are working right now to help you deliver better results for your clients and grow and scale your agency to 6 and 7 figures and beyond. My pleasure to welcome in the studio today, Rob Da Costa from Da Costa Coaching. Rob started, grew, and sold his own agency before retraining to become a coach. And since then, he's worked with over 250 agency owners in the past 14 years to help them grow in a sustainable, profitable, and enjoyable way. And really, that's what agency business should be. Should be fun, should be profitable, and should be sustainable and long-term. Rob, amazing to have you here. Thanks for swinging by.
No worries. Thanks for inviting me. And it's amazing. I always add that enjoyable piece on to about growing an agency, because it's amazing how many people almost don't give themselves permission to enjoy it because they're very fixated on the end point, and they think when they get to that end point they'll have all this stuff, this money, and they'll enjoy it, but they forget to give themselves permission to enjoy the journey. So I think that's super important, just as a kind of by the by.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we start businesses, right? We start things because we want to contribute, we want to do something special, but we also want to enjoy it. We want to have some of the freedoms, right, that come with having a business and having some autonomy and doing what we want to do and putting what we want in the world. So that should be a fun process.
It should be. You'd be amazed at, I think, how many people start with that intent, but then the business kind of takes a life of its own, and they end up working for this monster that they've created, and they feel like they don't have control over it. So, that's a key part of what I kind of remind people of and help them do, is make sure they are in control and make sure that they enjoy the journey as well.
I'd like to go into that and sort of how you help agencies overcome sort of those roadblocks. But let's start at the start. Take us back to your agency, sort of how and when and why you ended up as an agency coach. Give us the skinny on the last 30 odd years, I guess, as we were talking before the show. It's been a long haul for you, but you've got a lot of experience to bring to the table. So I'd be interested to hear what that journey's been like and what brings you to here today, helping agencies overcome their stuff.
Well, if we can go all the way back, I was a kind of arrogant 24-year-old. I was working for a IT software company, and I worked my way up to marketing manager, and I realized I wasn't going to go any further. And as a marketing manager, I was trying to hire marketing agencies, but found it really difficult because they didn't really understand the complex tech of what we did. So I was always having to rewrite copy and so on. And I thought, hang on a second, there's a gap in the market here. I'm going to leave. I'm going to start my own agency that's focused on the tech sector, but I'm going to bring with it a tech bent so that we understand it, so that the marketing agency isn't just being a glorified administration for the client, which is what I felt the agencies we were hiring. So I kind of was naive. I left. I started out CITPR, my first agency, and my story is probably going to be very familiar to a lot of your listeners. So year one, I worked on my own, did pretty well, earned a decent living, but I always had that intention of growing it. So at the end of year one, took on my first employee, and then we grew, took on a second employee, and so on and so on. I think I never had a really clear destination in mind. I just knew that I wanted to grow the business and I wanted to run my own business. And so over the next 11 years, we grew the agency to be 25 staff, and we became a full service agency. So as we were just chatting before the show, Chris, that looks slightly different back in the day. We're talking about the early to mid 90s here. So, pre-internet, pre-email and all that stuff. So it looked a bit different, but fundamentally, we were writing content, we were doing graphic design, we were doing lots of magazines, that kind of stuff, working in the tech sector. And over the next 11 years, I say grew to about 25 staff. But after 11 years, I got tired of running the agency. And what I just alluded to in the intro kind of happened to me. I sat at my desk one day and thought, hang on a second, this isn't why I started the business. How has it got to be like this? And at the same time, we kind of got seduced by someone saying they were interested in buying us. So we decided to sell the agency, and actually we ended up having 2 buyers, which was great. So they could kind of play off each other. Sold the agency back in 2002, and then did a 2-year earn out with a big US company that bought us, which is a highly unpleasant experience. Again, a lot of people who've sold their own businesses will be able to relate to that. And then I left there and thought, what on earth am I going to do with the rest of my life? I was about 38 or 39 at the time. And I didn't know what I was going to do next. And if I ever work with clients who are looking at selling their businesses, one of the best pieces of advice I ever give them is you have to know what you're going to do next. Do that succession planning. Don't just get fixated on the sale, but actually know what's coming next. And I didn't. So it's a really tough time in my life. But anyway, eventually, I figured that coaching would be something I'd be really interested in. So went and spent a couple of years retraining, worked at a coaching firm, actually an Australian firm called Sherlaws, for about 1.5 years. And then decided I wanted to be self-employed because that's what I've always done. So I left there and set up Da Costa Coaching in 2007. And I think in the first year and a half, I was trying to be a generalist coach. So in theory, I could work with a big corporate one day and a small startup the next day. But I realized that I wasn't winning those big corporate accounts because I didn't have the background to win them. And if I went to speak to a small startup and said, oh yeah, I work with this big corporate, they'd be thinking, well, you're not going to understand me. So I wasn't doing very well at winning them either. So after about 1.5 years, I realized I needed to niche my business. So thought, and that choice for me was very easy because I worked in the marketing agency sector. So it was easy to niche to that. And that's when my business really took off. And now I work with SME marketing agencies of all types, not just digital agencies, but more traditional PR and graphic design and content and full service agencies, as well as the digital audience. And my typical client is somewhere between maybe 1 and 15 staff. So turning over from sort of, I'm not sure what this is in dollars, but in pounds, sort of £400,000 up to about 2 to 3 million pounds is sort of my sweet spot client.
Yeah, it's about 12 million Australian dollars, I think.
Thanks for the conversion.
Something like that. The dollars to pounds is pretty scary when you're buying in pounds from over here.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, I can imagine that's been a pretty epic journey over that time. And I think the way you've laid that out, that agency journey is that if you had to lay out the standard agency journey from sort of starting up as a solopreneur all the way to sort of exit, I imagine that's given you a lot of experience at all those different kind of those inflection points that happen as an agency. Like you go from yourself, you get some clients, now you got to employ someone to scale and get capacity. That's kind of an inflection point. Yeah. Then now you've got 25 people, and now that's a whole other. Now you're into emotional intelligence and relationships, and it becomes a whole different beast. And then you're selling and you're exiting. Somebody else is now your boss, and you've got a whole other level of psychological factors and emotions and all this other stuff at that stage.
For sure. I think the first inflection point is when you start out on your own and you grow and you get to that point where you're at capacity and you've now got to make a choice of, am I going to be a freelancer or am I going to grow an agency? So am I going to be a freelancer that maybe outsources some of my work to other freelancers, or do I want to grow an agency? And there's a huge mindset shift that happens very early in the journey. And I think you need to consciously make that decision, because if you don't, things happen, external things happen to you, opportunities come along, pandemics come along, whatever it is, but those external things happen and then you don't feel like you've got in control. So I think one big piece of what I do with a lot of my clients is just make sure that they're making conscious decisions so that they're staying in control of their journey and that they realize that there's no blueprint. That's another huge learning, I think, nice. Is that there's no blueprint for this. It's what you want, and to let ego get in the way and compare yourselves to people you admire and your competition is not always a very helpful thing, because you can end up being in a place you don't want to be. I often do vision work with clients. It's often a starting point when I start working with them. And on a number of occasions over the past 14 years, I've had clients who would do the first session with me and we would do this vision planning, and then they would go away and reflect on it and review it. And they come back in the second session, they say, hey, Rob, look, sorry that we wasted that first session, but I've thought about it and what we wrote down last time isn't what I want to do. And I'm like, no, we didn't waste that first session. Or sometimes you've got to go there to figure out that you want to be here. So I think it's super important that people really think, park their ego and really think, what do they want? What is it that really is driving them to do what they do? And therefore, what does their agency look like over time, rather than just thinking, well, if I'm a year in, I should have this many employees, and in my 3 years in, I should be turning over this much money. Those things don't really help, I don't think. Of course, we have to have those plans, but they have to be connected to what you really, really want. And I think to that point as well, you kind of have to connect your personal vision into your business vision as well, because, you know, obviously we're humans and we're, you know, that whole thing. And it isn't too healthy just to, although I'm not a life coach or anything, it's not too healthy to compartmentalize those things as separate areas.
Yeah. I mean, we are our business, right? The business is an extension of us, and that's where it can get quite sticky when you're on that exit end, or when you're bringing other people into your baby, into your business, into this thing that you've built and cherished and nurtured, and then someone's going to come in and take 30% of it, and you're like, oh, I'm giving away, you know. So you're absolutely right. All the human stuff, the emotion, the psychology, or your mindset, all of that stuff bubbles up. So it's really important to understand that you are a human running a business, and that the two are they're linked. They're absolutely linked. But I really like what you're saying as well about being able to make conscious choices for yourself based on yourself and what you want to do. So I think exactly like you're saying, a lot of guests on the show, particularly coaches, have sort of said this as well, that a lot of these days, imagine even your and my day coming up, we had not, when we thought of advertising, we thought of BBDO and Clemengers and these, you know, big McCanns and big agencies that was advertising. Now there's such a diversity in what an agency can be. There's super low barrier to entry.
Yeah.
But there's also Instagram, where every second post is 7-figure consulting, 7-figure agency, 8-figure this, Rolls Royce, blah, blah, blah. So I think it's easy to buy into, well, that's what success looks like. That's what I need to do. So I want to grow a 7-figure agency.
Yeah.
Without sitting back and going, well, what does that actually mean? What am I going to have to do to build a 7-figure agency? That's a considerable investment of time and energy and resource and personality. And am I fit to do that? So I think that's really, really important.
And if you don't put if that's what you want to do, which is perfectly valid, but you don't put the right component parts in place, then you are going to have one heck of a lot of stress, and you're going to have a really unpleasant time. And so I think part of understanding those inflection points you mentioned is like, what are the parts that I need in place to get to that point in the most pain-free way? What are the infrastructure investments that I need to make? What are the systems and processes? Who is the right client to fit? What's the right price for that? Who are the people that I need? You know, all of those things need answering, and that's what makes up a vision. I think a lot of the time people think about a vision in terms of money and people, but that's so very two-dimensional. There's so many other aspects you have to look at to make sure that your agency is growing in a consistent way. That means you've got control and that everything doesn't sit on your shoulders. I just sent out an email to my list yesterday that got quite a good response, and it was just entitled "It's Lonely at the Top," which of course is, you know, any business owner is going to feel that way, that the weight of the world sits on their shoulders and everyone's looking at them to come up with the answers. And so I think it's super important that whatever you aspire to be, that you are really mindful about the things that you need to put in place so that you can enjoy that journey, and that everything doesn't sit with you, and that you're building an infrastructure that's not going to fall over because you've got to the next stage in terms of growth, but you don't have all the infrastructure pieces in place to support that growth.
Yeah. And I guess that touches on two of the aspects we spoke about earlier with that sustainability, right? Longevity. If you're really in this game for the long haul, whether this is something you just want to do forever, or if you're just starting out and you don't really know, but this is the path you're going to go down. I'm going to build and grow and scale an agency. Whether I'm setting that up for an exit deliberately, or whether it's something down the line maybe. Yeah, I think it is absolutely critical that you make your own choice and you you find your own path and do it for your own reasons, because then that's where that enjoyment part can slip away when you're trying to achieve someone else's vision or someone else's version of what success or an agency looks like. That's where it starts to slide, and suddenly the agency's going over here, but my value system's over this way, and you get this divergence, and that doesn't feel that's kind of where I got to with my agency. That parts of it were going that way, I was going this way, and you're like, this doesn't feel good anymore.
I think a lot of people will relate to that. And, one really big piece of advice or really big question I ask people is when they say, oh, my goal is to sell my business. I'm like, are you sure that is your goal? Why is it that you want to do that? Because succession planning can mean so many things beyond just selling a business. And I don't plug my book, but I wrote this book, The Self-Running Agency, based entirely on the fact that actually what most people want to do is they want to ultimately build an agency, an agency that's less dependent on them. But that doesn't necessarily mean selling. I mean, if you could build a really profitable agency and then you could have a team of people running it for you, and it freed up your time to go and pursue other things or only do the things that you really enjoy, that you're really great at in your agency, and it gives you flexibility and freedom, then isn't that an amazing thing to build? And that's probably going to give you more money in the long run than selling what is fundamentally a service-based business. And when you're selling a service-based business, there's a whole bunch of intangibles that add value to it. And often people get seduced by that idea as well. And the reality is that you're probably never going to get anywhere near the kind of money that you dream of, or you see those ads that you were saying earlier that promise you that they'll achieve. It's just not true. So I think when people talk about selling, I was like, okay, let's talk about succession planning and let's explore all of the different options of what that could mean for you. And it doesn't always result in selling. In fact, I'd say when we have that conversation, probably 8 out of 10 times people say, oh, actually, yeah, you've got a point. Actually, what I really want to do is build this thing so it's more self-running, so I don't have to be involved, and I don't have to be involved in every client account. And, I talk about the client service hamster wheel of doom, and a lot of agency owners are stuck on this hamster wheel of doom that they can't get off because everything's dependent on them. All the clients want them on the account, and that's doing the opposite of building a self-running agency. So I think succession planning can mean a number of things, and people just have to get clear. I think another point as well, Chris, is that people need to acknowledge that their vision can change. So you might create a vision on day one, but you need to be revisiting that vision all the time. And I think if the pandemic of 2020 taught us anything, it's that we need to be nimble and we need to be prepared to change our plans. And that's true with a vision as well. So I think visions fail when they get cast in stone, when they don't have a roadmap back from the vision into a strategy, into a plan to actually deliver them. And then they just become a hope and a dream, or something that we beat ourselves up with because we haven't delivered it.
That is a super important part of having that big vision, having that purpose, and then literally baking that 5-year plan down to, well, what am I doing in the next 5 minutes to make that happen, to hit my week, to hit my month, to hit my quarter, blah, blah, blah. But then steering that every week, right? Every month, every quarter, checking in, going, do I still want that? Because maybe stuff's changed. Maybe, as you said, a pandemic's hit and I just cannot deliver to this. Maybe I was in the hotel game and all of the hotels now have no money and I can't do that anymore. How do I get resourceful and change what I'm doing? Vision's the same. The goals change drastically, that kind of thing. I think that's exactly right. You've got to have that breadcrumb trail from today to 5 years, but then also be able to kind of shift that around and just check in, like what you said, then just regularly checking in saying, is that still what I want? Yes. Yeah. Okay. I make, again, conscious choices, conscious decisions give you that freedom and those options.
Yeah, for sure.
I like what you're saying also. Exit can mean very different things. Exit doesn't necessarily mean someone comes in and buys your business, which can be quite a horrendous experience.
If I could give myself a piece of advice back when I was thinking about exiting the business, that's what it would be. I don't regret anything I've done, but if I had a really good team beneath me, and I should have set the business up so it could just run itself, so I could do other things. I didn't. Just back in back in the early 2000s, coaching wasn't well known. None of this stuff was well known. And so I was sort of on my own, and I didn't have a board. I didn't have a coach, didn't have a mentor. So I knew what I knew, and I felt all I felt, and I had no one challenging me about that, and no one saying, hey, Rob, look, I know you're tired of doing this, but actually, why don't you work on setting it up so the agency is more self-running, and that would give you the freedom and flexibility you want to pursue these other things, and it would still give you income, and it would still, and I know I would have ultimately earned more money that way than I did through selling the agency.
That's a really important caveat as well, I think, is that realization that yes, you could go out and sell to a WPP or an Omnicom. They'll come in and you got a shitload of money in the bank, but nothing to do now, versus you can probably still earn that money over the next decade if you systemize and automate and take yourself deliberately out of the business. So that big sale, that money, that having that bankroll, you can get there both ways, right? And it's very dependent on what do you want to do. What's the right path for you as an individual?
For sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. So next sort of inflection, well, between we sort of covered getting started, getting underway, and sort of that exit point, that end of the business. In between that sort of scaling stage, we say you're sort of starting to onboard staff, maybe you're growing bigger accounts, you're starting to handle bigger clients, more top tier accounts. What are the sort of stumbling blocks that you find in that mid-range?
I think it's the what works. I mean, to use the metaphor, sort of, I could shout across the office and people could hear me, and then suddenly that doesn't work anymore because I've got too many people. It's sort of that is that stage where the systems and processes that you had or didn't have because you didn't need them, because you only had a few people in the agency and you could talk to them and they would give you feedback and all that stuff in an informal way. Suddenly you need to start putting those systems and processes in place. And if you think about a business's growth, people draw like growth in a curve, but it isn't a curve, it's actually a stepped growth. So the horizontal part is the infrastructure investment, and you put the infrastructure investment in order to grow, and then you put the next infrastructure in order to grow. It's a bit like building their foundations on a house. So I think that next stage is about putting systems and processes into your business that enable you to grow, and removing those things that don't, and then thinking really carefully about the people that you're hiring, so that you're growing your capacity through your people, and you're and you're hiring the best kind of people you can possibly afford, so that you can delegate stuff down, leaving you, the owner, to do the things that you are best at doing. And those usually fit into sort of three areas. One would be driving the agency forward, so that's having the vision and having a plan. Second of all would be probably the person that's heading up new business, because you're going to be the best person to sell your agency to potential clients. And then the third area would probably, as well as managing your team, would be being a face to some of your bigger accounts, but not being intimately involved in the day-to-day running of them. So it's super important that you can start delegating stuff down to people, and that you focus on putting systems and processes in. And it's interesting because when people hear the word systems and processes, their sort of shoulders sink and they think, oh God, bureaucracy and all the rest of it. But no, it's completely the opposite. If you put really good, robust systems and processes in, they're going to help you. They're going to run efficiently in the background. Of course, today, those systems and processes can be software automation and all that kind of stuff. So if you get it right, they help you grow. They don't get in your way. It's not loads of bureaucracy that you're putting in place. But of course, one of the things that you're going to want to make sure that you are monitoring and doing well is being profitable. And it's easier to grow to that next stage where your cost base goes up, because you're starting to hire more staff. You may well take an office. You're investing in new tech and these systems and processes. You've also got to make sure that is mirrored by winning the right kind of client and charging the right fees. Because I think what happens is that agency that was in that stage one of growth, that initially took on any kind of client just to fill the pipeline, and then probably one business because the clients like them and they were probably cheaper than the competition. That type of client isn't going to work for you. So you've got to really think about your pricing. You've got to make sure that you're winning business not because you're cheaper than the competition or because you promise ridiculous levels of service, but because you're going to deliver a better result for the client. So this is a whole value pricing, value selling conversation, which perhaps another podcast. But so I think you've got to change your mindset around your pricing as well, and make sure that you are pricing so that you can keep investing back in the business and you can hit those margin levels that you have put into your plan, and you're not just taking on lots of small clients that are really difficult to service, that are needy, that you're constantly over servicing, that perhaps you're not monitoring and measuring internal efficiencies yet, so you can't really know how profitable, how efficient you are internally at the moment. So that's one of the systems that you really need to be putting in place at this stage.
So from what I take out of that is two major pieces. Is that just financial literacy, just basic financial literacy, which I think can be a hard thing for, particularly when we come in as the craft, right? We come in as the coder, as the designer, as the web developer, as the creative mind. Doing the finance and the taxes and the accounting and doing all of that stuff isn't really in our wheelhouse. But you need to know that stuff. That's the sort of thing you have to at least have oversight on. You can't palm that off to someone else to look at. You've got to know your numbers. You've got to have that base level of financial literacy to say, okay, this is good, this is bad. I can sort of see where things are trending. And the second part of it, like on habits and on systems, a lot of times I see like systems and processes are a bit like habits. We have personal habits and then you've got business habits. Whether you decide intentionally, right, to set up systems and processes, you're setting them up if you don't set them up. It's like a habit, right? Habits just come naturally. If you don't choose to eat well, guess what? Your habit is that you eat bad. Right. So you're making an unintentional choice. If you just a system and a process is what you're doing. If you're not intentional about changing it, it's a bad system. It's a bad process. And it's going to take you somewhere. I
always say to people, when you start your own business, you've got to be good at three things. You've got to be good at juggling three balls, if you like. And the first one is the thing that we're always usually good at because it's doing our craft. So, if I'm setting up a web design agency, then I'm probably a really good web designer. So that's sort of a given. The second thing you've got to be good at is getting enough business into your agency to grow it. So that's all about new business. So that's sales and marketing and client retention and growth. And then the third area you've got to be good at is running your agency. So that is the things we've just been talking about, finance and HR and managing people and putting in the right systems and processes. And of course, people are really good at the first one, but they're often not good at the second and third. And I think that's one of the key reasons why so many businesses fail in their first or second year. So I think if you're going in to start your agency and you're mindful that I actually need to develop these other two areas and I can't just focus on the first thing because I'm good at it and I like it and it's in my comfort zone, I've actually got to think about the future of my agency. So I've got enough new business coming in and I've got to think about running my agency and I've got to learn the skills of managing people and recruiting people. And I've got to work out what those infrastructure investments need to be so that I can grow in a sustainable, profitable way.
Yeah, amazing. That is that shift from creator to business owner. As I think you bang on that. That's where it falls over and the enjoyment falls out. The sustainability is not there because you need to again consciously make that switch to, yes, I want to be a business owner. And if I want to do that, means I need to do X, Y, and Z. If I don't have those skills, I got to go get them.
Yeah, sure. Or hire them in or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Or go and chat to somebody like Rob who can help you pull that all together from his vast experience. And sort of on that note, that's a good place for us to wrap. Rob, if people are interested in what you do, they like to come work with you or just connect with you, come and hang out with you online, where's the best spot for them to come and find out more about you?
I think you got my website, which is the link there. The website is just full of a lot of hopefully valuable content, both in terms of what's written there and things you can download and free trainings that you can watch and so on. So I think that's a great place. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well. I think those are probably the two major places that I hang out. And like I say, the website has got lots of content that can hopefully help people and can drill into some of the stuff that we've talked about today in a bit more detail as well.
Awesome. And all of those will be linked in the show notes below for everyone listening out there who's not watching the video. Those will be linked, so you can click on those and go connect with Rob and find out more about what he's doing. And you leverage his vast experience over the last few decades. Experience like that is very hard to find. So if you can tap into somebody like Rob and get that experience out, very beneficial.
My grey hair helps me.
Well earned. It's very well earned. That's what I like to say. It's this is all well earned.
I'm a bit ahead of you, I think.
Yeah. I hope to get there. Hopefully I'm still doing this in another 14 years. That'd be a great place to be in. But
Fantastic.
Really enjoyed this conversation, Rob. Thanks for dropping by this morning for you, and really appreciate you swinging by. And
great having a chat about all this stuff. We could probably talk for hours, couldn't we? But
that's the thing, yeah.
Hopefully there's some good nuggets in there for the people who are listening.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's been a lot of insight and a lot for people to come in and tease out, go through this episode a few times and, really connect with the material, because there was a lot in there, a lot of really good insights, particularly from Rob. So, yeah, appreciate you swinging by. And thanks for everybody else out there for tuning in. And as always, feel free to like and share and subscribe and all that good stuff. And we will see you on the next episode. Thanks for being here, Rob.
Cheers. Have a great day.